There are tons of weird and obscure fighting games out there. From games that never made it out of Japan, to the fighting games that were never released in general. But it's rare nowadays to be on the cusp of something that's seemingly brand new and unexplored in the fighting game world. And that's exactly what happened when Taizo Hori on Twitter posted a random AliExpress item they found called the Laptop Arcade. At first glance, the Laptop Arcade just looked like your run-of-the-mill Android Chinese main machine that you find all over the place. You know, the ones that fill up your search results when you're trying to find some actual arcade hardware. But this was different. Taizo was able to see that this device had what seems to be totally original games that info online was almost non-existent for. And most importantly to us, some of these mysterious original games look to be fighting games, with one in particular called Rupture Void looking way too good to be true. As the search for more info on the Laptop Arcade continued, the developers of these original games were eventually found. A Chinese company known as Xinyan Yuzha Zhanghu Interactive Entertainment has seemingly created multiple original IPs to be released on Android. But the existence and playability of these original games seem to be solely tied to the Laptop Arcade, and we'd never know what these games were really about unless some poor soul out there bought the $150 device themselves. And thankfully, not only did someone buy the Laptop Arcade to test it out, two people did. Ninja Nister and Mr. MKL both bought the device to see these mysterious games, and both confirmed that yeah, the Laptop Arcade is the real deal, and the games were playable. After watching Mr. MKL stream himself going through the games, I knew I had to be the next sucker and the confirmed third customer for this mysterious device, because the thought of exploring a brand new fighting game was too irresistible for a fighting game degenerate like myself. So, I paid $160 total, and came to the sad realization that I still haven't bought Grand Blue Versus on Steam because it's still $60, but I immediately shelled out almost triple that for a random mobile Android fighting game. But anyways, I patiently waited for my new toy. So, here it is, the Laptop Arcade. It's super small and has art for the original games stickered on the front and sides. The joystick is a little nub that feels extremely loose, but honestly isn't too terrible, just way too small. The buttons are horrendous and clicky in the worst way and are also super small, but I realize I'm a grown man and this might not be made for me, so I digress. The screen is 7 inches and very dim. The speakers are loud and crunchy, and the device itself runs on a custom operating system that I think is called Limon. All of the games are here, with the original games from Xinyan Yuzha Zhanghu being on the start screen, along with an old generic MAME emulator and a giant dump of bare bones generic Android games being listed in a folder. Out of the original titles, there is a racing game, a Romance of the Three Kingdoms based strategy game, and a Metal Slug-esque shooter. But for this video, I mainly want to focus on the games that made me buy the Laptop Arcade in the first place. Rupture Void, Fury Fight, and Fighting Master Ultimate. But before we finally talk about the fighting games, I want to discuss one of the main driving forces behind getting the Laptop Arcade: preservation. Like I said, the original games on the device didn't exist anywhere else. They seemingly aren't on some Chinese version of the App Store. There was no info that could be pulled from any of these games besides generic blurs from the developer sites. And there didn't seem to be any real plans of release besides being randomly stuck on the Laptop Arcade itself. So I decided to pony up and try to pull the games so they weren't lost forever, which was a process in itself. I'm a dumb, ignorant dude with a business degree who almost failed every programming class I ever took, but even I knew that extracting Android APKs couldn't be that hard. So I took the Laptop Arcade apart, hoping to find a tablet inside that I could boot into some kind of safe mode or something to get to the main Android operating system to dump the games. But I guess I was a bit naive to think that this would have a tablet inside, so I needed to somehow get the games out in another way. After asking around, some others helped in pointing me towards the direction of dumping the games using the Android debug bridge, and after some trial and error, I was able to get the games out. But, of course, they would boot and then close. It seemed like there was one last bit of DRM stopping the games from being played. Everyone I asked sadly couldn't figure it out either, and I thought the whole thing was screwed. And I had even filmed entire run-throughs of the games off camera, 2008 style, so I could make this video. But then, thankfully, days later I got a random Twitter DM. Renzo La Parca saw my thread I had made about the Laptop Arcade on Twitter, and decided to help solve my desperate plea and take a look at the games to see if he could crack them. And he did. almost immediately. The games were now fully playable, and the laptop arcade was no longer needed. Renzo actually has an amazing article he wrote discussing the whole process of how he decompiled the games to get them to boot. So please check it out in the description because I learned a lot, and I thank him for making the preservation of these games possible. So let's finally discuss Rupture Void, an anime style fighter that seems to have a ton of effort put into it visually and aesthetically. Rupture Void has 8 original characters with unique and varied designs. We have our poster child for the game, Red Sheep, who is our Chun-Li-esque fighter who has this demon looking form she can turn into. Hawkeye is a hard-boiled cop with a tatsu that doesn't connect properly. Arado is a small but fast character with this cool armor punch. Number 6 is a punk who can whip out a motorcycle at will to attack. Big Rogan is a killer clown who stole Wolverine's Berserker Slash and has chainsaws. Nomad is a knife-throwing Guile lookalike. Sakura and Aoi are 2 child twins that can zone you out hard. And Dr. Marissa is a cyborg lady with one of the coolest supers in the game. Through screenshots and short clips, you might be thinking to yourself that Rupture Void might just be the ultimate hidden anime fighter gym, but sadly, playing it is a different story. Movement in Rupture Void is unique, to say the least. You can run and stop at ease, your backdash is basically a teleport, but the jumping? Ah man, the jumping. This basic attempt at air mobility is what really kills Rupture Void. Jumping is terrible. Jumps are so slow, get you nowhere, and worst of all, can't even travel over an opponent 99% of the time. You have to dash jump to cross over an opponent, but then you're overshooting the jump and everything just feels wrong. What arguably sets anime fighters apart from traditional fighters is the movement, and Rupture Void fails at it significantly. But anyways, Rupture Void is a 4-button fighting game, with a light, medium, and heavy attack button. And the heavy button also becomes your super button when the meter is filled, so you totally lose access to it. Which is something I'd normally be upset at, but I can see why super motions aren't something the developers expected you to really be able to pull off on an Android device. There's also a button to charge your meter DBZ style, but it seems super worthless. Combos are done by linking and chaining moves, but a lot of characters' kits don't really work in tandem together. Most characters have moves or specials that can't be comboed into and are almost worthless, so a lot of the game turns into finding your one button to spam until you have meter to go into super, or abusing the tech system. Rupture Void has air teching to get yourself out of dropped air combos like any other anime fighter, but Rupture Void hurts the player air teching 50% of the time because there is no invincibility while air teching, and since the air mobility is so bad, you can just get tech trapped repeatedly. I know I'm dragging this game hard, but what hurts about Rupture Void is that it's almost cool. It's got awesome characters, some seriously stellar animation, fun gameplay ideas, but it just feels so sluggish to play. Some seriously simple changes could turn this into something special, but as it exists right now, it's a tech demo with an awesome art team behind it. I mean, look at the final boss's super in the game. I love it. But then right after it's done, I have to move again, and I'm back to being sad. Oh yeah, and to add insult to injury, Rupture Void does steal a ton of sound effects from other games. Most notably, the jump sound effect is from Guilty Gear. So, if they were going to steal the sound effect, they should have stolen how good movement in Guilty Gear feels too. Rupture Void does have multiplayer, whether on the laptop arcade or not. So, check it out for some almost fun time. Our next game is Fury Fight, which is actually a beat 'em up set in the Rupture Void world. Or maybe Rupture Void is a fighting game set in the Fury Fight world. I'm not too sure. But you control Red Sheep, Hawkeye, or Abato, and go through endless waves of the same repetitive enemies. Fury Fight isn't too bad, but it's just a generic beat 'em up, filled with all the genre cliches and none of the flavor that could make it special. You fight through many of the characters from Rupture Void, who are either bosses or regular enemies now. and there seems to be some deep lore in the series, but sadly, I'm not the one who's gonna piece it together. All I know is that I'm on a surfboard and I have to kill like 100 astronaut bears to save the world. And now finally, we have Fighting Master Ultimate, which may be one of the most shameless attempts at a game I've ever seen. While Rupture Void stole sound effects, Fighting Master Ultimate steals everything. This game is just a terrible Street Fighter V asset dump, like literally. There are 6 characters, and every single one is just a Street Fighter V character. You have your Ryu, your Balrog, your Zangief, your Sagat, your Sakura, and weirdly enough, your Lucia. Fighting Master Ultimate is a 6-button game like Street Fighter, except kicks are on top and punches are on the bottom for some reason, and specials are done by just holding forward and pressing a button, except for Shoryukens, which are done with a down-down button input, which is simple enough. A lot of games have this input, but Fighting Master Ultimate's coded like trash, and every input is doubled for some reason, making the most basic attempt at doing the special like impossible. So ultimately, this is just a rushed asset dump that was seemed to be glued together in the Ultimate Fighting engine and not worth anyone's time. And thankfully, the developers knew this because there's no local multiplayer at all, so you can't subject anyone else to this trash. Except for in training mode, because another player can control the CPU for some reason, but there is no other versus mode. I'm just not going to question it. So, that's the laptop arcade. One of the silliest rabbit holes I've gone down, but couldn't resist. Was it worth it? Yeah, because I'm an idiot. I hope one day I can see a more polished Rupture Void, because the team really does seem like they do care. And it's just so strange to me that a game like this exists in the first place, and it's been localized too. So please, just remove all the stolen assets and fix the movement, and we'll already be on track for a way better game. Thank you to everyone who made this video possible, and please check out the links in the description. Thanks.